They came to see history, but found horror instead.
The monument that weeps. The restorer first observed the marble bleeding while she changed into cleansing the Taj Mahal's cenotaph at dawn. No longer metaphorical tears inside the stone's veins, actual blood, seeping from microscopic fissures within the white marble, pooling in the delicate floral inlays, staining the Pietra Dura paintings that had taken artisans years to finish. "Dr. Kapoor," whispered Priya Sharma, the conservation expert who'd been assigned to restore the monument's deteriorating surfaces. "The stone is hemorrhaging." Dr. Ravi Kapoor approached, his expression moving from skepticism to horror as he tested the reddish fluid emerging from the marble. "That is now not viable. Marble does not produce organic compounds. This must be infection from. From what? There is no source. No pipes, no preceding damage on this place. And look," Priya traced the pattern of seepage. "It is coming from the areas wherein the inscriptions mention Mumtaz Mahal, from the Quranic verses describing paradise, from the floral styles intended to symbolize everlasting gardens. Nowhere else, best in which the monument references her." They gathered samples. Laboratory analysis confirmed what their eyes refused to believe. Human blood, type O wonderful, containing DNA that matched no living person, but confirmed genetic markers consistent with 17th century Mughal lineage. The marble turned into generating blood belonging to someone who died almost 4 centuries ago. "It is Mumtaz's blood," Priya said, understanding how insane it sounded. "The monument is weeping her blood. In any case, these years, in the end these centuries, her grief, or Shah Jahan's grief, has ultimately saturated the marble absolutely. The stones can't hold any more sorrow. It is manifesting bodily." Over the subsequent weeks, the phenomenon spread. Blood regarded at some stage in the complicated, seeping from walls, pooling on floors, dripping from the domes indoors. The Taj Mahal, built because the most beautiful monument to like ever conceived, became hemorrhaging the grief it had absorbed from hundreds of thousands of traffic over 4 centuries. However, the bleeding turned into just the beginning. Employees commenced reporting visions, translucent figures glimpsed in peripheral imaginative and prescient, moving through the garden pavilions, standing at the reflecting pools. Now not the usual traveler crowds, however people in 17th century Mughal courtroom get dressed, their faces twisted with expressions of profound sorrow. "They may be mourners," explained the nighttime security defend who'd worked at the Taj Mahal for 30 years. "Absolutely everyone who ever visited to grieve someone they'd misplaced. The monument absorbed their sorrow together with Shah Jahan's. For 400 years, it's been collecting grief, becoming saturated with loss and mourning and the pain of these left in the back of. Now it cannot preserve any extra. The sorrow is manifesting." Priya began experiencing it without delay all through her recuperation paintings. She'd be cleaning a difficult marble screen whilst she'd experience overwhelming unhappiness. No longer her personal, however, transmitted through the stone itself, the accumulated grief of all and sundry who'd ever mourned on the Taj Mahal flowing into her nervous system via her fingertips. She'd see flashes of recollections that weren't hers. Shah Jahan's face as he watched his beloved wife die in childbirth. The emperor's tears as he designed a monument worth of her reminiscence. The grief of widows who'd visited hopping to honor their own lost loves. The sorrow of dad and mom who'd brought pics of lifeless children, searching for solace in a place constructed to commemorate loss. "It is too much," Priya informed Dr. Kapoor after a particularly overwhelming consultation. "The monument has been absorbing grief for centuries. It turned into design to specific Shah Jahan's love and loss, however it have become a magnet for all people's mourning. Human beings carry their unhappiness here, and the marble accepts it, holds it, preserves it. We are status in a structure actually constructed from grief, now saturated past ability. Then, what can we do? How will we prevent a monument from bleeding reminiscences? I do not suppose we are able to prevent it. I assume it wishes to release the grief it's been holding. needs permission to permit cross of 4 centuries of amassed sorrow. That night time, Priya returned to the Taj Mahal alone. She'd acquired special authorization for overnight access, claiming she had to look at the bleeding phenomenon below one-of-a-kind lighting fixtures situations. However, her real motive turned into exclusive. She desired to talk with anything cognizance the monument had advanced through its centuries of soaking up grief. She stood in the foremost chamber, placed her fingers on Mumtaz's cenotaph, the false tomb above the actual burial vault below, and opened herself to the monument's sorrow. The flood of grief became immediately and overwhelming. 400 years of mourning poured into her recognition. Shah Jahan's devastation at losing his spouse, the tears of every widow who'd visited, the pain of each discern who'd lost a baby, the heartbreak of every lover separated by way of dying. All of it compressed into the Taj Mahal's marble, it all in search of release. "I pay attention, you," Priya whispered. "I apprehend what you've been holding. You have been built to incorporate one guy's grief, however you've been soaking up anyone's grief ever since. You cannot keep any more. You want to permit go." The monument replied, not in phrases, however, in pure emotion. It didn't want to allow move. The grief had ended up its reason, its identification. Shah Jahan had built it to hold his love for Mumtaz, and in keeping love, it had additionally preserved all of the sorrow that includes love misplaced. To launch the grief could be to betray its unique reason, to fail in its duty as monument to everlasting devotion. "But you're drowning in it," Priya stated. "The grief is destroying you. The marble is bleeding, the structure is deteriorating from the inside out. You need to release it or you'll crumble underneath its weight." The Taj Mahal confirmed her what could appear if the gathered grief changed into launched. Every person who'd contributed sorrow to the monument over 4 centuries, millions of mourners, their grief would go back to them concurrently. Or worse, considering that maximum have been lengthy lifeless, the grief could spread across Agra, across India, becoming a wave of sourceless mourning that might devastate anyone it touched. "Then we launch it step by step," Priya proposed. "Step by step. Allow humans come now not to deposit their grief, however, to percentage within the monument's grief. Transform the Taj Mahal from repository to memorial, not an area where sorrow is stored, however, in which it's acknowledged." Honored and launched. She spent the next months developing the protocol. Operating with psychologists, grief counselors, and non-secular leaders, Priya created a ritual that visitors ought to participate in. They could touch the marble, well known the monument's collected sorrow, proportion their own grief, and then consciously launch each, letting the emotion glide through them and use up rather than being absorbed through the stone. "You're treating a constructing love, it needs therapy," Dr. Kapoor said, skeptical, however willing to strive something to prevent the bleeding. "The building does want remedy. It's been traumatized by 4 centuries of soaking up all and sundry else's trauma. We're giving it, and those who visit, a manner to heal." This system started out on the anniversary of Mumtaz Mahal's loss of life. Volunteers came to participate in the grief release ritual. They touched the marble, felt the monument's collected sorrow, acknowledged it, after which, through guided meditation and intentional release, allow it flow away. Now not pushing it elsewhere, no longer hiding it, but honestly freeing it, letting the emotion disperse into the ecosystem wherein it could in the end fade. The impact turned into instant. As every participant finished the ritual, the bleeding marble near wherein they had touched might dry, the seepage preventing, the stone returning to its ordinary pristine white. The visions of translucent mourners became much less common, much less excessive. The overwhelming unhappiness that had permeated the complicated commenced to boost. However, not every person should participate. The accrued grief was too huge, too concentrated. It'd take years, perhaps a long time, for sufficient people to cycle via the ritual to absolutely relieve the monument's burden. And some of the grief did not want to be launched. The private layers, Shah Jahan's original sorrow, the grief so profound it had inspired the Taj Mahal's production, refused to deplete. It became woven too deeply into the marble's shape, too fundamental to the monument's cause. The Taj Mahal will constantly bring Shah Jahan's grief, Priya defined to the conservation board. It is suitable. That's what it was constructed for. But the additional grief, the 4 centuries of accumulated mourning from millions of site visitors that we are able to release, that we need to launch, or the monument will sooner or later collapse under its weight. 3 years into the grief release application, the Taj Mahal had stabilized. The bleeding had stopped in maximum regions. The visions had dwindled to rare occurrences. The overwhelming unhappiness that had threatened to crush the structure had eased to a profound, however possible, melancholy. However, the monument remained essentially changed. Site visitors who came now pronounced feeling something one of a kind, now not crushing grief, however, a kind of bittersweet acknowledgement. The Taj Mahal now not absorbed their sorrow. As an alternative, it pondered it lower back with compassion, displaying them that grief become everyday, that they were not on my own of their loss. That mourning changed into a part of the human enjoy to be venerated rather than hidden. You have changed what the Taj Mahal means, Dr. Kapoor advised Priya all through a walk through the now solid gardens. It is not just a monument to one lady's death anymore. It is emerged as a monument to grief itself, acknowledgement that love and loss are inseparable, that constructing something stunning from sorrow is humanity's oldest and maximum critical art. Priya looked up on the monument, its white marble sparkling within the afternoon solar, not bleeding, however, marked by means of the centuries of grief it had held. I failed to exchange it. I just helped it evolve. Shah Jahan built it to hold his love for Mumtaz. However, love does not exist in isolation. It comes with grief while it's misplaced. The Taj Mahal has been coaching us that lesson for 400 years. We simply eventually found out to pay attention. Now and again, overdue at nighttime when the tourists had left and the complicated was quiet, Priya could go back to the main chamber. She'd area her hand on Mumtaz's cenotaph and feel the marble's warm temperature, not from the solar but from the grief still woven into its structure. Shah Jahan's grief, which could never absolutely depart, which the monument might deliver for all time as testament to a love so profound that its loss ought to inspire the world's maximum lovely building. Thanks for containing it for see you later, Priya would whisper to the stone. Thanks for accepting everyone's grief when they had nowhere else to take it. You may rest now. No longer release the whole thing. A few sorrow ought to be preserved, should be venerated, should continue to be as reminder that love matters enough to grieve whilst it's long gone. However, you don't must carry everyone's grief anymore. Simply your very own. Simply the grief you were constructed to preserve. The marble might pulse with warm temperature below her hand. Not agreement, precisely, however acknowledgement. The Taj Mahal were drowning in accumulated sorrow, have been bleeding out the grief it couldn't comprise. Now it was recovery, getting to know to preserve Shah Jahan's grief without being destroyed by the weight of absolutely everyone else's mourning. Years later, conservation reviews might note the Taj Mahal's stepped forward balance. The deterioration that had threatened the structure had slowed dramatically. The marble that had been bleeding confirmed no similarly seepage. The monument that were slowly collapsing beneath the burden of 4 centuries' grief had stabilized, its burden eased enough that it may preserve status for hundreds of years greater. Travelers might go to and marvel at the beauty, take their pics, put up their opinions. Most might by no means understand that the monument had almost been destroyed, now not with the aid of pollutants or overlook, but via an overdose of sorrow, that its marble have been saturated with grief to the point of bleeding, that it had taken a massive collective ritual of grief launch to save it. However, people who participated inside the application knew. The people who'd touched the marble, felt the monument's collected sorrow, and chosen to release it in place of add to it. They understood what the Taj Mahal honestly become. Not only a monument to lost love, but a testament to how grief, when acknowledged and honored and released, may be converted from crushing weight into bittersweet splendor. The monument stood beside the Yamuna River, white marble sparkling against the Indian sky, nonetheless carrying Shah Jahan's grief after 4 centuries, however now not drowning in every person else's. It had learned to be what it changed into constantly supposed to be, no longer a repository for sorrow, however a reflection of it. displaying visitors that grief changed into well-known, that love changed into well-worth mourning, that splendor may want to emerge from the innermost pain if that pain became honored rather than suppressed. And Priya Sharma, the restorer who'd saved the Taj Mahal by using teaching it to launch what it could not maintain, would now and again stand inside the gardens at sunrise and watch the monument seize the first mild. She'd recollect the bleeding marble, the manifestations of grief, the monument's desperate want to launch what have been crushing it. "You're nevertheless right here," she'd say softly, "nonetheless standing, nonetheless beautiful, nevertheless coaching us that it's okay to grieve, that loss is part of love, that monuments to sorrow may be filled with more beauty than monuments to triumph. Thank you for holding on lengthy sufficient for us to apprehend." The Taj Mahal didn't reply. However, within the growing light, its marble glowed with warm temperature that seemed to come back from within, the warmth of grief recounted, commemorated, and converted into something that would be carried without breaking, preserved without drowning, remembered without destroying. The monument to everlasting love endured its watch over the river, not bleeding, now not determined, now not drowning. Just being what it had continually meant to be, testament to the truth that great love creates super grief, and that both deserve monuments worthy of their power. The symmetry breaks. The architect located the asymmetry by coincidence throughout a virtual mapping survey of the Taj Mahal commissioned to create millimeter-particular 3D fashions for conservation planning. Dr. Aisha Rahman had been measuring the monument's famous best symmetry while her contraptions detected something impossible. The Japanese minaret becomes 0.4 millimeters taller than the Western one. "Size mistakes," insisted her colleague Vikram, checking the equipment calibration. "The Taj Mahal is perfectly symmetrical. Shah Jahan obsessed over it. That turned into the entire point, mathematical perfection as expression of everlasting love." But Aisha's instruments had been specific to 0.1 millimeters, and the discrepancy becomes steady throughout multiple measurement periods. The Eastern minaret became sincerely taller, and while she tested other supposedly symmetrical factors, she determined more deviations. The southern dome top changed into 0.7 millimeters better than the northern. The eastern cenotaph turned into 1.2 millimeters similarly from center than the western. Dozens of tiny asymmetries, invisible to the human eye, however undeniable to precision measurement. "It's not random variant," Aisha stated, plotting the deviations on a chart. "Look at the pattern. The asymmetries are increasing in importance through the years. Historic surveys display them developing, slowly however measurably. The Taj Mahal is turning into much less symmetrical each year. Something is pulling it out of balance." She offered her findings to the Archaeological Survey of India, expecting skepticism. As an alternative, she was invited to a labeled briefing with officers who'd been tracking the same phenomenon for decades, but had kept it secret to avoid panic. "The asymmetries started acting in 1932, defined Dr. Sengupta, the survey's senior research director. "Subtle before everything, slightly detectable with the size equipment to be had then. But they've been accelerating. We've tried the whole lot: structural reinforcement, basis stabilization, even experimental recovery techniques. Nothing stops the flow. The Taj Mahal is falling out of symmetry, and we don't know why." "What occurs when the asymmetry becomes visible?" Aisha asked. "Whilst vacationers can see it with bare eyes." "We do not know, but we're getting close to that threshold. Any other decade at modern charges and the deviation will be obvious. The Taj Mahal's defining function, its best symmetry, could be gone, and there's something else." Dr. Sengupta pulled up older statistics, files marked as categorized for over a century. "This has occurred earlier than." The files described a preceding length of asymmetry in the late 18th century, rapidly after British colonization began. The monument had started out drifting out of symmetry till nearby clergymen achieved a ritual, they claimed was based on authentic Mughal practices. The asymmetries had reversed, the Taj Mahal returning to ideal stability. However, the ritual's information had been lost. The priests who knew it had died without passing on the expertise. Anything's causing this. It is not merely physical, Dr. Sengupta said. Structural engineers say the asymmetries violate physics. The deviations require forces that do not exist, as though the monument is being pulled by means of something that has mass but is not cloth. We assume it might be associated with the monument's authentic motive. It was a tomb, Aisha stated, a mausoleum for Mumtaz Mahal. At the surface, sure, but look deeper. The Taj Mahal's geometry is more complex than ornamental. The proportions, the mathematical relationships among factors, the astronomical alignments, they advise the monument was designed to do something beyond housing a tomb. We assume it became built to keep a balance, and that stability is failing. Aisha spent weeks analyzing the monument's geometry, trying to find patterns within the asymmetries. She determined they were not random but organized, constantly pulling inside the same path, closer to the Yamuna River. As if something within the river became attracting the Taj Mahal's mass, slowly pulling it out of ideal symmetry. She started investigating the river's history and located worrying accounts. Earlier than the Taj Mahal become constructed, the web page had been taken into consideration unfortunate, an area in which the river's behavior was inexplicable, wherein currents flowed backward throughout certain moon stages, where water once in a while rose in defiance of gravity. The Mughal architects had chosen the website deliberately, constructing the monument as counterweight to something anomaly the river contained. The Taj Mahal is a seal, Aisha found out. Its ideal symmetry creates a gravitational stability that neutralizes something inside the river. But the symmetry is breaking, the seal is weakening, and something changed into being contained is beginning to drag loose. She shared her principle with Dr. Sengupta, looking ahead to dismissal. Instead, he pulled out more labeled documents, recent ones, marked as noticeably restrained. 2 years ago, we began detecting uncommon phenomena inside the river adjoining to the Taj Mahal. Water flowing upward, localized gravity anomalies. Something is rising, and it's getting more potent because the monument's symmetry degrades. What's it? We don't know, but we want to repair the symmetry earlier than it fully manifests. The question is how. We cannot physically alter the monument. Moving even one stone would chance catastrophic structural failure. The asymmetries should be corrected through the equal mechanism that created the authentic symmetry. Aim, arithmetic, and something else we do not absolutely understand. Aisha commenced reading Mughal architectural texts, attempting to find references to the Taj Mahal's construction that might explain its deeper cause. She found encoded passages in Shah Jahan's private writings, mathematical notations hidden in the margins of architectural plans, suggestions that the monument's developers understood principles present-day physics become simplest starting to apprehend. They knew about gravitational anomalies, she told Vikram, displaying him the decoded texts. The Mughals were not just constructing a tomb, they had been building a gadget to balance localized area-time distortion. The precise symmetry creates same and contrary gravitational effects, neutralizing the ambiguity inside the river. But the symmetry is not self-maintaining. It calls for a weregoal to keep it. Conscious purpose from who? At first, Shah Jahan himself. He failed to simply feed the Taj Mahal. He maintained it, spent years after Mumtaz's death meditating within the monument, focusing his will on preserving its ideal stability. His grief powered the symmetry. His love for Mumtaz, expressed as mathematical perfection, counteracted the anomaly. And when he died, the priests took over. The ritual the data mentioned, it changed into meditation combined with geometric focus, businesses of practitioners retaining the symmetry through collective goal. They understood that the Taj Mahal required more than physical maintenance. It needed mental upkeep, aware while keeping the stability. And when that understanding became lost, the symmetry began to drift, slowly at the start, sustained by way of residual aim left by using centuries of focused meditation. However, accelerating as that residual diminished, as the monument have become more vacationer enchantment than sacred webpage, as human beings stopped drawing close it with the reverent consciousness that had stored it balanced. Aisha assembled a team, architects, physicists, meditation practitioners, even descendants of the authentic Mughal craftsmen households. Together, they reconstructed the symmetry preservation ritual from fragments in ancient texts, mathematical styles in the monument's design, and knowledge preserved in oral traditions that had in no way been written down. The ritual required positioning practitioners at particular geometric points during the complex, their meditations synchronized to create a community of centered consciousness that strengthened the Taj Mahal's symmetry. Not bodily pressure, however, goal may take place through geometry. Attention affecting depend through mechanisms that physics becomes simplest, starting to theorize. This sounds insane, Vikram stated earlier than the primary try. So does a monument drifting out of symmetry despite no bodily force performing on it, Aisha answered. We are past conventional causes. Either cognizance can affect bodily shape through centered aim, or we watch the Taj Mahal fall apart and some things in that river destroy free. They carried out the ritual at sunrise, 21 practitioners positioned in keeping with the golden ratio relationships encoded in the monument's design. For 3 hours, they reflected on best symmetry, visualized the monument balanced, centered their collective will on restoring mathematical harmony to 42 acres of white marble. Once they measured afterward, the asymmetries had decreased via 15%. The eastern minaret changed into now only 0.34 millimeters taller than the western in preference to 0.4. The technique turned into running. But additionally, they observed something annoying. The gravity anomalies within the river had intensified. As though anything become there identified the restoration attempt and was combating again, pulling harder in opposition to the monument, attempting to break the symmetry before it can be absolutely restored. It does not want to be sealed again, Dr. Sengupta stated, reading the river measurements. Whatever the Taj Mahal turned into built to contain, it's conscious, and it has been running for centuries to break out. Over 6 months, Aisha's group performed the ritual weekly, gradually decreasing the asymmetries. However, the method became arduous, keeping targeted meditation even as countering active resistance from the river anomaly. Several practitioners withdrew, unable to deal with the mental pressure. Others stated dreams of being pulled underwater, of drowning in the Yamuna, of something extensive and patient promising them energy if they'd just preventing. It is trying to compromise us, Aisha realized. The use of mental strain to interrupt our awareness, weaken the recuperation. We want to boost up the manner before we lose more practitioners. They intensified the timetable, everyday rituals instead of weekly, growing the meditation duration, recruiting extra practitioners to replace folks that withdrawn. The asymmetries persevered to lessen, 0.25 millimeters, 0.15 millimeters, 0.08 millimeters. They have been coming near perfect symmetry. However, the river turned into responding greater aggressively. Water now flowed backward alongside 100-meter stretch adjacent to the Taj Mahal. Gravity fluctuations had been detectable with standard instruments. Travelers mentioned feeling dizzy close to positive parts of the riverbank, experiencing vertigo that had no medical explanation. We've one more consultation to move, Aisha instructed her remaining group at the final morning. The asymmetry is down to 0.03 millimeters, barely measurable. One more a hit ritual need to carry us to best symmetry, seal anything's looking to emerge. They gathered at dawn, positioning themselves for the remaining time. The meditation started out smoothly, the practitioners synchronizing their attention, directing their collective aim in the direction of perfect stability. The Taj Mahal answered. Aisha should feel it, a subtle shift inside the monument's presence, as if the building itself was sighing with comfort, returning to its natural kingdom. However, halfway through the consultation, the resistance hit. The river anomaly surged, combating the healing with determined depth. Numerous practitioners broke attention, gasping as they felt something huge urgent towards their minds. The meditation pattern fractured. "Maintain," Aisha commanded, forcing her very own attention to heighten. "We're too close to prevent now." People who remained redoubled their efforts, pouring the whole lot that they had into the very last push in the direction of symmetry. Aisha felt her recognition expand beyond her frame, merging with the monument's geometry, perceiving the mathematical relationships that described the Taj Mahal's shape. She saw the asymmetries as distortions in that mathematical perfection, saw the way to easy them out, restore the balance. And he saw what became inside the river. It wasn't a thing but an opening, a tear in space-time in which the river's waft had worn reality skinny over millennia. Something from the opposite facet had been pushing through, the usage of the Yamuna's erosive force to widen the space. The Taj Mahal's best symmetry had closed that hole, sealed the tear with mathematical precision. But as the symmetry degraded, the seal had weakened, allowing anything changed into past to push via once more. The tear changed into almost open. Every other day, perhaps, and the outlet might be huge enough for something to emerge absolutely. Something large and affected person that have been attempting to break into physical truth for hundreds of years. Aisha pushed more difficult, the use of not just her meditation training but desperation, fear, willpower now not to permit the seal fail on her watch. The alternative practitioners joined their will to hers, forming a unified pressure that pressed against the asymmetries, smoothed them out, guided the Taj Mahal back into best mathematical concord. The final asymmetry corrected at 7:42 a.m. The monument finished ideal symmetry, not simply near however exactly balanced, each measurement exactly reflected. The seal became whole. In the river, the tear closed with a legitimate, remote thunder. The backward-flowing water reversed to regular. The gravity anomalies vanished. Anything have been seeking to emerge became another time contained, locked out of bodily reality through 42 acres of flawlessly symmetrical white marble. The practitioners collapsed, exhausted past measure. However, they'd succeeded. The Taj Mahal become restored no longer simply physically, but functionally, its genuine cause fulfilled, its deepest mechanism repaired. What became it? Vikram asked days later, when Aisha had recovered enough to debrief. What was looking to come via? I do not know. I saw the outlet, however, no longer what changed into beyond it. Something large, something antique, something that shouldn't exist in our truth. Aisha regarded out on the Taj Mahal, its perfect domes reflecting inside the Yamuna's placid water. Shah Jahan built it for romance, sure, but additionally for protection. He identified the ambiguity in the river, understood it was dangerous, designed a monument that would seal it through perfect mathematical balance. The love story turned into actual. However, it was additionally cover, giving him cause to construct something big and exactly calibrated in exactly the spot needed to close a tear in truth. Will the symmetry hold? As long as a person continues it. We have reestablished the ritual, educated new practitioners, created protocols for monitoring. The attention upkeep has to continue, regular meditation targeted on maintaining stability. If we let it lapse once more, the asymmetries will go back. And if they do, then anything's been attempting to interrupt through for hundreds of years eventually succeeds. And we find out what happens when you allow something from outdoor truth into our area time. Aisha back to the Taj Mahal weekly, leading the maintenance rituals, ensuring the symmetry remained perfect. Other practitioners joined her, know-how now that the monument required greater than just bodily preservation. It wanted a purpose, centered will, meditation that strengthened its geometric perfection. The vacationers never knew. They visited the Taj Mahal, marveled at its splendor, took their photos, posted their evaluations. They noticed a monument to everlasting love, and it became that. However, it was also a seal, a lock, an exactly calculated mathematical tool designed to hold something out, to shut a door that desired very much to open. And as long as the symmetry held, as long as someone maintained focus on best stability, the door would continue to be closed. The tear could live sealed. Truth could remain intact. Aisha had saved now not just a monument, but probable the world. Now not through engineering or bodily recovery, but through understanding that some structures served functions beyond their seen characteristic. That consciousness should affect count number in approaches physics, become only starting to understand. That best symmetry changed into occasionally less approximately aesthetics and greater, proximately keeping eldritch horrors from breaking via tears in area time. The Taj Mahal stood flawlessly balanced beside the Yamuna River, monument to like, architectural masterpiece, tourist destination, and mystery sealed towards matters that ought to not be. Its ideal symmetry maintained by meditation, its private reason regarded best to folks that fought to repair it, its real characteristic preserved along its mythical beauty. And under the river's surface, something big and affected person waited for the day while the symmetry would possibly damage once more, while consciousness would possibly waver, when the seal might fail and the door might ultimately, after centuries of attempting, swing open. The reflection pool's secret. The photographer first observed something incorrect with the mirrored image while reviewing his dawn photographs of the Taj Mahal. In every picture showing the monument reflected inside the reflecting pool, the mirrored image turned into subtly distinctive from truth, no longer in obvious methods, however in info that made him look twice. The reflection showed the monument in ideal situation, no discoloration, no weathering, no signs of age. At the same time as the real Taj Mahal, above bore centuries of environmental damage, its reflection appeared pristine. "It's just water clarity," said his assistant Mira while he pointed it out. "Perhaps the perspective, the light quality." "Look at this," David interrupted, zooming in on precise details. "The marble staining at the real dome, see it? Now look at the reflection, it is clean, flawlessly white. And right here," he pointed to scaffolding at the eastern minaret wherein healing paintings become ongoing. The scaffolding exists in fact, however, no longer within the reflection. The pool is showing us the Taj Mahal because it became, no longer as its miles. David became enthusiastic about documenting the phenomenon. He photographed the reflecting pool at every hour, in all weather conditions, continually finding the identical discrepancy. The reflection showed the monument in its authentic glory whilst fact confirmed its weathered present state. But greater stressful, the mirrored image become additionally displaying different matters. Figures walking inside the gardens that didn't exist within the real grounds. Shadows forged by systems not status. Info from architectural elements that were eliminated centuries in the past. "The mirrored image is not displaying the prevailing," David instructed Mira after weeks of documentation. "It is showing the past. The pool is a window into the Taj Mahal as it existed within the 17th century, preserved in water that's been reflecting the monument for 400 years. But it wasn't just the beyond. While David examined his pictures more cautiously, he noticed the figures inside the mirrored image were not static. They moved between photographs, progressing via day-by-day sports, interacting with each other. The reflection changed into alive, a preserved model of the Taj Mahal's early years playing out constantly inside the pool's surface. And then David noticed something that became his fascination into dread. The figures inside the reflection were looking him. While he photographed the pool, they would turn in the direction of wherein he stood, their attention interested in the photographer they shouldn't be capable of understand. They have been privy to him across 4 centuries and the boundary among reality and mirrored image. "We want to forestall," Mira said, after reviewing the modern-day snapshots showing a crowd of 17th century figures all staring immediately on the camera function. "This isn't always herbal. The reflection is responding to us, acknowledging our presence. That's now not how water works." However, David couldn't prevent. He dedicated his career to photographing India's monuments, and this was the invention of a lifetime. Evidence that the Taj Mahal's reflecting pool preserved extra than snapshots, that it one way or the other captured, and maintained the monuments beyond life in a state handy to modern statement. He commenced traveling at night time while the complicated was closed, having bribed protection for after-hours get right of entry to. The nighttime reflections were even greater active. The figures carried torches, held problematic ceremonies, moved through rituals that the historical information slightly mentioned. David photographed the whole thing, building a visual archive of Mughal court docket existence that no historian had ever documented. Until the night he noticed Shah Jahan himself. The emperor appeared within the reflection at exactly 2:47 a.m., strolling through the moonlit gardens closer to the pool's side. He became older than in his official snapshots, his face lined with grief, his moves heavy with the weight of loss. And he became staring without delay at David, not at wherein David stood, but at David himself, seeing him across 4 centuries as though the boundary of time was simply a veil that would be gazed through. Shah Jahan knelt on the pool's edge, reached down as if touching the water, and spoke. David couldn't hear the words. The reflection captured visible facts, but now not sound. However, he should study the emperor's lips, may want to see the desperate reason in his expression. "Come back, please come again." He changed into "Speak me" to Mumtaz, seeking to reach her via the reflection, through the pool that reflected the monument he'd constructed in her reminiscence. And as David watched via his digicam, he saw something seem within the mirrored image pool that made his blood freeze. Every other discern was rising from the water, a woman in problematic court get dressed, translucent however awesome, emerging from the pool's depths as though the water itself became giving her form. Mumtaz Mahal, useless for 400 years, manifesting in the reflection in response to her husband's grief-bothered name. David dropped his digital camera. The sound of it hitting the marble course shattered the nighttime stillness, and the entirety changed. The mirrored image rippled even though there was no wind. The figures in the mirrored image, Shah Jahan, Mumtaz, all the courtroom contributors and servants, turned towards David with unified interest. After which they started to transport, not in the reflection however out of it, their translucent forms rising from the pool's floor like steam given shape, stepping from the past into the present, crossing the boundary that David's commentary had one way or the other weakened. "You've got been watching us," Shah Jahan said, his voice echoing from 4 centuries ago but heard truly inside the gift night. "Each photograph, each statement, each second you studied our mirrored image, you've got been thinning the barrier, making it viable for us to step through." "You are no longer actual," David stammered, backing away because the figure's superior. "You are just reflections, pictures preserved in water." "We have been reflections, but reflection, determined intensely enough, will become reality. Your digital camera has been pulling us forward, giving us substance on your time via consistent interest. We are what you've got been reading, the past made gift through the act of observation." Greater figures had been rising from the pool, dozens of them, all of the human beings whose pictures had been captured inside the reflecting pool over 4 centuries. Servants and architects, guards and traffic, all of us who'd walked past the water and left their picture at the back of. The pool were amassing them, keeping them in its mirrored image. And David's obsessive documentation had awoke all of them. "What do you want?" David requested, nonetheless backing away, his mind unable to procedure what he was witnessing. "To complete what become interrupted," Shah Jahan said. "I constructed this monument to preserve my love for Mumtaz, to preserve her memory alive all the time. However, memory isn't enough. The reflecting pool was intended to do more than show the monument's beauty. It became designed to be a bridge, a manner to deliver Mumtaz's lower back via reflection, through the preserved picture of paradise I constructed for her." The emperor gestured at the Taj Mahal looming in the back of them. "Each element of this shape serves the resurrection. The correct symmetry creates stability among worlds. The astronomical alignments channel cosmic forces. The reflecting pool serves as medium because the boundary among dying and life. I spent 20 years building a device to convey her back. However, I died earlier than finishing the very last ritual. We've been trapped inside the mirrored image ever since, present however not honestly reciting, watching for a person to open the doorway completely." "I am no longer seeking to resurrect anybody," David protested. "I used to be just taking snapshots." "Pics are present-day magic," Mumtaz said, her voice like water flowing over stone. "They seize reality, hold moments, make the past reachable to the prevailing. You've been using that magic on our mirrored image, and magic responds to purpose even when that purpose is subconscious. You desired to file the past. You've succeeded. You wanted to make records tangible. It is standing earlier than you. Now you must assist us whole what Shah Jahan started out." The figures surrounded David, now not threatening but insistent, their translucent bureaucracy sparkling faintly inside the moonlight. He ought to see through them to the gardens beyond, but their presence became plain, their attention targeted absolutely on him. "The ritual calls for a living observer," Shah Jahan defined. "A person standing in the gift while looking into the past, developing a hyperlink between times. Your images has mounted that hyperlink stronger than whatever in 4 centuries. All that stays is for you to speak the words, to give permission for the reflection to absolutely appear. What occurs if I refuse? We remain as we're, trapped in reflection, current but no longer clearly real. And you may spend the relaxation of your existence seeing us in each image, every mirrored image, every mirror. We will comply with you through all reflective surfaces, haunting you with the know-how that you could have freed us but selected not to." David checked out Mira, who'd been looking the scene spread in taken aback silence. "Inform me I'm hallucinating. Inform me this isn't virtually taking place." "I see them too," she whispered. "And I see the pool, take a look at it." The reflecting pool was glowing from inside, the water luminescent with amassed moonlight and something else. The amassed essence of 400 years of reflections, all the pics and moments captured in its floor, all building in the direction of this second of capability manifestation. "If I do this," David said slowly, "if I speak something phrases you need, what occurs to the reciting international? Does bringing the past into the existing exchange things, ruin things?" "The Taj Mahal exists in each times already," Shah Jahan stated. "We're now not developing something new, but completing something that changed into always meant to be. The monument become designed as bridge between demise and existence, between past and present. Permit it serve its proper cause." David notion approximately the obligation, the impossibility, the sheer weight of what he became being asked to do. However, he additionally notion approximately the images, approximately his obsession with documenting the mirrored image, approximately how his work had led inevitably to this moment. "What are the words?" Shah Jahan spoke them in Persian, then translated. "I witness what was, I acknowledge what is. I permit the mirrored image to come to be real. Let the bridge entire. Allow the past step into the existing. Allow love transcend time." David repeated the phrases, first in English, then trying the Persian, his pronunciation atrocious but his aim clear. And as he spoke, the reflecting pool replied. The water rose without wind, forming a column that connected surface to sky, a pillar of liquid mirrored image that solidified because it grew. The figures inside the pool, all of them, now not just Shah Jahan and Mumtaz, but all and sundry who'd been captured in reflection over 4 centuries, began to solidify, their translucent paperwork taking over weight and substance. The past changed into manifesting inside the present, pulled ahead by way of David's phrases and Shah Jahan's historic magic, and the Taj Mahal's cause ultimately fulfilled. The reflecting pool had been designed for this all alongside, now not just to mirror beauty, however, to function medium for resurrection, for bringing lower back what were lost through the power of ideal mirrored image combined with unwavering love. But something was incorrect. Because the figures solidified, David realized they weren't becoming fully real. They had been caught between states, not quite strong but now not transparent, existing in liminal space between mirrored image and reality. The ritual turned into incomplete. "What is lacking?" he asked Shah Jahan, panic growing. "Why aren't you absolutely manifesting?" "The ritual requires sacrifice," the emperor said, his shape flickering among stable and translucent. "Something from the reciting global need to accept to the reflection in alternate. The stability should be maintained. To deliver the useless into the existing, the reciting need to enter the past." David understood with sinking fact what turned into being requested. "You want me to take your vicinity within the reflection, to turn out to be trapped in the pool so you can be loose." "Not just you. The ritual calls for observers, plural, 2 people to witness and allow and sacrifice. 1 is inadequate to anchor the transformation." David checked out Mira. She met his eyes with an expression of terror and resignation. "We did this," she said quietly. "Our snapshots, our statement, our obsession with documenting the mirrored image. We opened the door, we've to finish it." "I cannot ask you to." "You are no longer asking. I am selecting. Due to the fact if we do not complete this, we're going to be half of haunted all the time, trapped among worlds similar to there. As a minimum, if we go into the reflection, it's clean. It is whole." They stood collectively at the pool's area, searching down at their reflections in the sparkling water. The surface showed them absolutely, reciting people about to become permanent photos, preserved for all time inside the reflecting pool, that were waiting 4 centuries for this change. "Collectively," David said, taking Mira's hand. They stepped into the pool. The water changed into cold and inviting concurrently, accepting them with the ease of liquid that have been looking ahead to this second. David felt his substance converting, his stable frame turning into translucent, his present lifestyles becoming beyond existence, his reality becoming reflection. Round them, Shah Jahan and Mumtaz and all the other figures were finishing their transformation in opposite, translucent becoming stable, mirrored image turning into real, beyond turning into present. The alternate become going on, stability being maintained, the ritual subsequently fulfilled 4 centuries after it had begun. David's last notion earlier than turning into natural mirrored image become that his picks were proper all along. The pool did show the Taj Mahal because it was intended to be, no longer just physically perfect, however whole in its actual reason. And now, trapped for all time in that reflection, he would be part of that completeness, an everlasting observer of the monument's splendor from in the water that preserved its photograph. The ritual finished at dawn. The reflecting pool settled, its water returning to normal placidity, its floor displaying simplest the Taj Mahal, and the new figures ceaselessly preserved within its mirrored image, photographers. For all time documenting from within the photograph, they had been so passionate about taking pictures. Shah Jahan and Mumtaz stood beside the pool within the morning light, completely strong, fully real, again to existence through structure and magic, and the sacrifice of 2 observers who'd made the resurrection viable. The emperor checked out the Taj Mahal, his monument, his device, his best paintings, and smiled. "22 years to build," he stated. 400 years to set off, but subsequently entire, sooner or later serving the motive I designed it for. They walked into the monument, into the tomb that turned into now simply decorative considering loss of life have been conquered, leaving the reflecting pool behind. The water mirrored the Taj Mahal perfectly, showing it in its unique glory, displaying also the two new figures who joined its eternal reflection, David and Mira, for all time photographing, for all time gazing, forever documenting from their jail of preserved photo. Tourists could visit and admire the reflection's splendor, in no way understanding that the photographers trapped inside the pool had made the monument's genuine cause viable. By no means understanding that the Taj Mahal turned into extra than tomb, extra than memorial, more than architectural masterpiece. It became resurrection gadget, and it had ultimately succeeded in its primary function, bringing return the lifeless through the electricity of perfect reflection combined with ultimate sacrifice. The reflecting pool captured the monument in perfect element, retaining its beauty for all who came to peer. And within that preservation, David and Mira remained, their awareness trapped in water, their life decreased to everlasting observation, the rate paid to complete Shah Jahan's 4-century quest to bring his beloved returned from demise. The beyond had stepped into the present, the reflection had ended up real, and two reciting souls had grown to be reflections of their location, retaining the balance that magic always required, the change that made resurrection viable. The Taj Mahal stood beside the Yamuna, lovely and terrible, its reflecting pool maintaining secrets that travelers would in no way recognize, that two photographers were absorbed into its waters, that an emperor and his queen walked once more, that the monument's genuine motive was in the end fulfilled after centuries of waiting. And inside the pool's depths, David continued his paintings, photographing from within the reflection, documenting the monument from an attitude no reciting character may want to reap, his digicam frozen forever inside the moment of that final shot, his lifestyles preserved in water that would replicate the Taj Mahal until the monument itself crumbled. The mirrored image changed into eternal, and so turned into his imprisonment within it.